ILA 7740, Module 8, Putting Andragogy into Practice, Part 2. Now, it's a little hard to believe that we've gotten to this point so soon. It seems that the term has just begun and we are just getting into the topic, but we are actually at the end of the 9-week term, 8-week term, and we're going to finish what we started last week. And as I mentioned last week, that my motivation for creating these two modules was to kind of make it practical for you. My biggest concern is that when students are exposed to new concepts, that they don't always apply them in their work setting. Now, you may not be a school leader and have the authority to schedule professional training, but you are a teacher, and I doubt that any principal would deny you the opportunity to conduct training for your fellow teachers. So I'm hoping that by giving you some practical application, you'll be more inclined to apply these principles. Even if you're not the building level leader or an assistant principal, you'll apply these principles to the training that you conduct, and I think you'll find that your training really engages learners, and you'll have far more successful results than you've had in the past through your training efforts. So we're going to get into this final module and the second half of putting Andragogy into practice. As I did last week, I provided you with the 6 principles of Andragogy, and we addressed the first 3. The need to know, how experience can be used in professional learning for adults, as well as the learner's self-concept. Now, the principle 2 and 3 are heavy hitters. Those are big principles that we often do not take full advantage of. And much of it is due to the fact that we don't know what to do with a person's experience. Because we have our content that we've created, and even if we have allowed them a chance to participate in the creation of the content, we're not aware of the personal experiences that they have had to tie that to the content. So, in that particular vein, we talked about how to use experience in general so that a person can make meaning from that experience and then apply it to a concept in the training. And the third principle we dealt with really looked at, so how do we give participants a chance to have choice when it comes to what they learn. So much of what is presented to them is material that is either mandated by the district, or it's a training that the school offers. Sometimes it's tied to testing. But how do we give them a choice? Because what we know from our research in Andragogy is that adults really do crave autonomy. When they have gotten to the point where they can take responsibility for their learning, then they're at a place where they should have control over what they learn. Now this week, we're going to jump into what I think are real meaty principles from the principles of Andragogy, and I think really get to some that can be very useful to you. So we're going to look at the readiness to learn. When do adults need to know something? When does that training need to be offered? And how do we accommodate adult learners who are at various places on their professional growth? Because we have schools that have veteran teachers with 30 years plus experience, and then we have brand new teachers. The needs of those two individuals are very, very different than what you might expect. So how to find training that meets the need of the experienced teacher as well as that of the new teacher. Then in Principle 5, we're going to look at the problem orientation, the training orientation of what we offer, and look at some practical ways that we can address the problems that our school is encountering. And then finally, we're going to look at, in Principle 6, how do we motivate the learner? What are some practical things that we can do to motivate this learner to engage in the training so that they will stay with the training, as well as they will apply what they've learned in the training into their classroom setting. So this is kind of where we're going to go this week to finish up looking at the application of the 6 principles of andragogy. The big ideas that we're going to pull out of the 3 applications of Principles 4, 5, and 6 are, in Principle 4, we're going to talk about immediacy and relevancy. Those are big key ideas that are important to remember from that application. Then we're going to look at the fact that the big idea for Principle 5 is focus the training around problems within the school, district, within education, whichever context you have, but choose problems that are solvable, that people have control over some aspect of the problem. The third big idea that comes out of the applications are that motivation just doesn't happen. It's something that you've got to actually do. You've got to plan for it. You've got to implement it. And it doesn't come just from getting people excited at the beginning and having kind of a warm-up activity. That's not the kind of motivation that we're going to look at. We're going to look at motivation being intrinsic. When considering the learner's readiness, it's the key idea to take away from this is that if you want the best learning possible, the most effective learning, then the topic that is being presented has to solve an immediate and a real life problem. So it's got to deal with situations the school is currently facing, your classroom is currently facing, and needs addressing now. It can't wait for 6 months. It's not a problem that's been existing for 5 years. This is something that's just happening. It's new, novel, and it needs to be addressed. But it also has to be a real-life problem. In other words, it's not just a theoretical concern. This is something that is impacting students in the school now. It's impacting their achievement. It's impacting behavior, whatever that problem may be. But it's something that you cannot ignore anymore. It's having a serious impact on the effectiveness of the learning in the classroom, the effectiveness of discipline, or whatever it may be. Now, I've come up with 4 ways to make training more timely and or maybe more relevant. So to begin with, we'll talk about a survey. This is something that several of you did with your own professional learning, but I just want to pull it back out again and suggest that you conduct a survey of the faculty at your school through a Google form that you can create. They're fairly easy to do. Or if you have access to SurveyMonkey, that's another online program where you can create a survey and send it out to people and get their responses back. But the idea is you're choosing people that would probably attend your training, so you're kind of wanting to get from them, well, what do you want to learn about? What is it, something that you really feel would help you to be a better teacher? And one of you mentioned in your own survey that you found classroom management was still something that people wanted to know more about. So do a survey. I know it seems a weak way to do it, but again, allowing participants to collaborate in the creation of content is a great way to bring them into this process and motivate them to engage, as well as it's going to be the best way for you to identify what they need to know and something that's going to be useful to them right where they're living now. Now, another thing that you can do, and some schools have this, is that they have a professional development committee who is responsible for identifying content. And usually this committee is made up of teachers in various grade levels or in various disciplines, and they are the ones who are responsible for identifying topics, identifying speakers, and, basically organizing the training event. And the idea with content committees is that because they're part of that target audience, they're most likely going to come up with training that is going to meet the need of a broader audience. Not always, but the idea is that they probably are going to be able to zero in on what those classroom teachers need. A third option is creating flexible opportunities as a part of the training. So one of those things may involve allowing participants to choose a personal topic to study. So instead of doing it as a group, or even as a small group, like a subset of the school faculty, maybe what you do is you allow teachers to choose a topic to study on their own and give them the control over identifying goals and objectives of the training, the methods that they're going to use to do the training, how they're going to investigate the topic. Are they going to, watch a series of videos that they have or have access to, stream videos? Are they reading a book? Are they taking some kind of mini course online? Whatever is involved, that information is brought to the administrator, the content committee, and they approve that study. And then usually there is some kind of product that is produced. And this product may be a presentation to other faculty members about what the teachers learned. Maybe it's a resource guide. It's something tangible that the teacher can show the leadership what they learned. It's a demonstration of what they learned. The final way to create opportunities for teachers to learn material that's relevant to them is to look at the trends and issues in education. Oftentimes, if you're getting educational journals from Phi Delta Kappa or the other administrative organizations, their journals will have articles in them about issues that schools are facing now, classrooms are facing now. And those can give you ideas about topics that you might want to present at your school. Always, you can look at your test data and see where students are being successful and where they're not, and then connect that deficit to a particular training that would help them to remediate those students, to come up with new strategies to use in the classroom. So whichever method you choose, if it's not one of these, but you've come up with one on your own, remember that the goal is that the learning is addressing an immediate concern, an immediate problem, and that it's relevant to the teachers at your school. Nothing worse than a math teacher sitting in a training session that focuses on reading comprehension. Absolutely agree that math students, if they don't read well, are probably going to struggle in math. But many of the trainings that math teachers are sent to don't help them teach math better, they address other topics that aren't related, and of course they see that as a waste of their time. So remember immediacy and relevancy as you are deciding on what you're going to present. Principle number 5 deals with training orientation, and I call it the elephant in the room kind of orientation. It's the problem that is obvious, and it is so obvious no one wants to talk about it. They're so used to this problem that even though they know it's there, they tend to forget about the elephant in the room. And you would say, well, wow, if there was an elephant in the room, how could we forget that? You would be surprised how easy, after a while, if that problem is not addressed, and it just goes on and on and on, people cope with those problems. So another way to apply this orientation is to realize that adults want solutions to problems that they have in their professional practice. And so your job then is to create trainings that address those problems of practice. So the key, though, is to remember that as you're identifying problems to solve, and you may have numerous problems, whatever you choose as the problem you're going to provide training to resolve, it has to be a problem that's solvable. I always remembered when I was much younger, my family liked to watch the Miss America pageant. And you know that there are a lot of different aspects of that pageant that the contestants do. They have a swimsuit portion of the pageant. There's usually an evening wear, and then there's some kind of question that they're asked. And I can remember years ago how these participants were asked, if you had the power, how would you deal with the problem of world peace? How would you bring peace to war-torn countries? And I'm thinking, my goodness, what a question to ask an individual. The UN hasn't even been able to solve that problem, and yet you're asking this one and maybe very intelligent person to come up with a solution. So if you're choosing problems that cannot be solved because you don't have the resources to solve them, or you don't have the authority or power to solve them, then they're not usable problems. I mean, they may need to be addressed, yes, but they may have to be addressed at a different level. What you want to do is choose problems that may be broad in nature, but that are specifically affecting your school, and that you have A, the power to solve, and B, resources to solve them. All that you lack is the knowledge of how to solve them, and that's where the training comes in. So we can all agree that truancy is a problem in our schools. High rates of absenteeism really impacts that student's ability to comprehend. So what do we do about that? What can we, the classroom teacher or the school, do, and how can the teachers be involved in that? And that's where the training comes in. They're training on new tracking procedures. They're training on new strategies for contacting parents, whatever the case may be. So problems have to be solvable if they're going to be problems that you choose to address through training. Now, secondly, problems need to be relevant. And even though they are a problem, and we all agree that this is a problem, it may not be a problem at your particular school. It may be a problem that is global, and it may be affecting a lot of schools, but yours isn't one of them. So you need to choose problems that are impacting your faculty, and by resolving the problem through training, giving them strategies to deal with the problem, you're ultimately making their life better. So part of this involves, in relevancy, it involves that the learner has some kind of choice over the training that they pursue that would help them resolve the problem. Because the question that they're asking themselves is, how does this problem impact me? Does this problem impact me? Now, if it doesn't, then probably they're not going to be as engaged in the training you offer because it doesn't impact them. And it's kind of one of those, oh, it's nice to know, but really doesn't impact me kind of trainings. And in order to get their engagement, you got to get the teacher to own the learning, that they make the training their own, saying, I am taking charge of my own learning. This goes back to autonomy. They've gotten to the point where they can accept responsibility for their actions. Now they're at the place where they need to accept responsibility for learning what they need to know in order to resolve problems. And this is where you may have to do some pre-training, because there are some teachers that don't have a lot of self-efficacy, so they don't think they have a lot of ability, so they may need you to take a more direct approach in the training and teach them what they need to know. But by doing that, I don't want you to keep feeding them. I want you to teach them how to feed themselves, in other words, how to learn for themselves, how to explore and get answers to the questions that they have. And this includes that they almost become do-it-yourself learners. The third thing that is important for them to do as a part of this training orientation is, many of the problems you encounter at school are actually composites of a lot of smaller problems. And so your job is to break down the training into bite-sized pieces. Because what that does is it allows for the learner to have some choice in what they do. Instead of taking all 5 training sessions or modules, what they do is they maybe do module 1 and then module 4, because that's what applies to them. It allows you to identify skills. So in order to resolve this problem, it's a combination of using these 4 strategies. Well, if they already know how to do strategy 1, they don't need to sit in on that training. They only need strategies 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it allows you to really personalize or customize the training and create unique pathways for each participant in your session. Just as a way to remember this, how do you eat an elephant? The old joke asked, you eat him one bite at a time. And that's really how you deal with these problems in practice, is you eat them one bite at a time. Applying Module 6, which deals with motivation, is listed as the last of the principles. And I kind of think maybe it should be one of the first ones, but Malcolm Knowles puts it as the last one, that we need to look for ways to motivate adults in ways that are conducive to how they're motivated. And what we know from a lot of the research is that adults learn best when they are motivated intrinsically, not extrinsically. Of course, extrinsic motivation is the reward type motivation. And adults are much like children. They like those rewards. It's just the cost of an adult's reward oftentimes is more expensive than what you have to pay to get a child to be motivated. So here are some ideas that I thought of that might be motivational to adult learners. And I've come up with 5 of them, and maybe you can even add some more to these. Number 1 is that if you're going to motivate an adult learner, you need to provide training or learning that meets some aspect of personal or professional growth. We think of a lot of the training at the school dealing with professional topics, but there's nothing that says that you cannot provide training that meets personal needs, because a teacher may be more effective if they have some personal needs met. And I'm just going to throw this one out there, but assuming a teacher maybe has some challenges with managing money, it would be a great idea to provide training for younger teachers, or all teachers, I guess, who need help with managing their finances, and giving them some training on how to do that. That's a personal need, but maybe if they don't have the pressure of their finances on their mind, they're more effective in the classroom. But so you want to provide training that meets both professional and personal growth. You want to make that teacher better, increase his or her capacity. Number 2, we know that teachers are intrinsically motivated when they are given opportunities to be creative. So several of you mentioned in your trainings that you had times for them to make and take things. So they brought resources with them to the training, and then as a result of the training, they made something that they could use in their teaching, as well as something that would be beneficial to their classroom, and they took that back with them. There used to be a training program called Box It and Bag It, and teachers were exposed to particular strategies, and they were given the resources, and they had to make these strategy boxes that were filled with materials that they would use to do that strategy. And the teachers had the opportunity to create those boxes, and then they were able to use the boxes in their classroom when they came to that content. So anytime that you appeal to a teacher's creativity, an adult's creativity, it engages them, it motivates them, because they can see it's something that they can touch, and it becomes real to them. Number 3, obviously teachers are more motivated when the learning that the participants are exposed to is training that they have the capacity to successfully complete. In other words, it's not training that is above their level, technology-wise or content-wise. So you want them to have the confidence in themselves that they can complete the training. And if it doesn't, if it looks like, well, I'm not going to be able to do this, then they're not going to engage, and they're not going to be that motivated learner. Number 4, obviously teachers are motivated when the learning is challenging, so it's meaningful, but it's also fun. There's no rule in the book that says that learning can't be fun. We want it fun for our kids. It should be fun for adults. And now that may take you a little work to try to figure out what it is that would make something fun to an adult. But get some ideas from your participants. What would it take to make this fun? Number 5. Learning that has a definite goal and measurable objectives. And you'd say, well, how does that motivate? Teachers want to know the objectives on which their successful completion of the training is going to be measured. What's the purpose of the training? That goes back to the need to know, but they want to see that in writing. They want to know there's a definite beginning and ending to the training. And it's not one of these trainings that just goes on and on and on and on, so that they never see the end result. They never see the prize, the certificate, or whatever it is. So you want to create training that addresses a situation and then it resolves it. Now, there may be other ways to resolve it and other strategies that can be employed, but that in your training you're going to cover 3 strategies that every teacher can use to deal with whatever particular situation it may be. And then if you want to have a subsequent training, that's great. You can have another training that deals with other strategies to employ. But again, keeping it specific that way lets them see that they're not committing the rest of their lives to this training or the rest of the year to this training. They're committing a specific amount of time, and then they're going to go on to something else. Because let's face it, teachers, like children and like most adults, have a fairly short attention span. And you're probably going to keep their attention span for about an hour at the most. So you want to make sure that what you're conveying to them can be conveyed in that 1 hour. Now, if you're going to have multiple sessions, you need to be very clear with them that there are 3 sessions to this, and we're asking you to commit 3 hours to this. But if you do, these are the things that you're going to cover, and this is how it's going to benefit you in the classroom. The key idea here, of course, motivational is purposeful, so it doesn't just happen. And remember that just because you have a captive audience and they have to come to your training does not mean that you have a motivated group of learners. You're going to have to work to motivate them. What was the last principle, number 6? We are at the end of this session, and I hope that you found some practical ideas that you can apply when you're creating professional learning at your school. And I've enjoyed spending the time with you, and again, am glad that you were in this class. It's been a learning experience for me. I can't tell you the number of things that I've taken away from this. I certainly am seeing adult learning in a much different way because of your discussion threads as well as the assignments you've turned in and reading through Malcolm Knoll's book. So I wish you all the best. If you need anything from me here in the next few weeks before we break for the end of the term, feel free to contact me via email or call me at the university. Take care. Have a great rest of your week.